company blitzed the motorsport world in the 1960s with their Total Performance program. Now this was an insane marketing exercise that involved spending lots of money on racing to improve their public image and ultimately sell more cars. And of course this we like very much. Because of Total Performance, there's a bunch of high-performance Fords and Mercurys that might not otherwise exist. And I could go on and on about them, but I won't. Because this video is all about the Mustang Boss 302, which also exists because of Ford's Total Performance.
Tell me one more time why we never win. Well, number one, there's Mustang.
So Ford created the Boss 302 specifically to go Trans Am racing. You see, in the late 1960s, the popularity of the Trans Am was off the scale. Now, Ford funded a two-team effort in 1969 and reportedly spent $3.8 million on the race program alone. But first, they had to create the Boss 302 and get it homologated. Now, to be eligible, the Mustang was homologated as an FIA Group 2 touring car, and Ford had to produce at least 5,000 Mustangs in a 12-month period, which was easy enough.
If you buy a new Mustang, you'll have girls constantly calling you.
In New Jersey, the number is Bigelow 29.
But then the rules allowed for a more concentrated version, a homologation special that carried across all the important bits for the race cars. Only 1,000 of these had to be produced, and that's what the Boss 302 was. Now the Boss 302 motor basically mated the Windsor block with the canted valve Cleveland cylinder heads. Now the Trans Am had a maximum engine size of 5,000 cc's, and up until 1970 you couldn't actually make an engine smaller than its stock size to fit the regulations. So hence it had a 302 cube motor, and that's where the name came from. Ford used the fastback body in the Trans Am for the first time with the Boss 302. And there were several other parts fitted to the Boss 302 street cars that would then carry across to the race cars, including a front chin spoiler. And also Larry Shinoda, who was heavily involved with the project, had the faux rear brake duct holes in the rear quarters filled because he thought they were naff. Initial work on the Boss 302 Trans Am cars was carried out by Carcraft, who had previously been involved with Ford's GT40 Le Mans project. Now, Carcraft built at least 3 complete cars, and one of these went to Shelby Racing Team and the other went to Budmore Engineering. These were the 2 factory Trans Am teams in 1969. The remaining cars were partially built by Carcraft and then finished off by the factory teams, and they were actually supplied with surface plates by Ford. And these cars were super trick. They had drooped noses for better aero. This involved cutting 2 inches from the radiator support panel and then tapering back along the inner fenders. The bodies themselves and other metal parts were acid dipped to reduce weight, and holes were drilled everywhere within the bodies to save even more weight, but in special places where the tech inspectors couldn't find them. They had broadened stamped rear fenders, and the bumpers were tucked in closer to the body. The front hubs were beefier Lincoln units with 5-on-5 studs, which meant that special wheels had to be cast. Owens Corning fiberglass produced special thinner window glass to save further weight, and even the window cranks and handles had been shortened to save even more weight. It was all these little details that made the difference. All the components in the front suspension had been either heavily modified or built from scratch, but they were very cleverly created to look factory stock because that's how they were supposed to be. Now the front strut rods were designed to carry bearings rather than rubber bushings, and the rear leaf springs were narrower to allow for tyre clearance. Overrider bars came forward from the top of the rear axle and connected to the chassis. Spherical bearings were used in the front of the leaves and acted sort of like the lower bars in a 4-link system in partnership with the overrider bars that were mounted above. The motors carried two Holley carbs ranging from 1050 to 1150 CFM, although this was changed to a single Holley carb for 1970 under the new rules. And these motors produced around about 500 horsepower. Four cars went to Shelby and ultimately 7 went to Bud Moore, plus another 4 bodies, which I'll get to shortly. And a complete car was also built for Smokey Yunick at the request of Seaman Bunky Knudsen, who'd brought Smokey across from GM along with Larry Shinoda. Now Smokey's car never actually raced in the Trans-Am, even though it was built initially as a Trans-Am car. It was converted to a NASCAR Grand Touring car, and it actually competed at the very first event at the new Talladega Superspeedway. And that was the one and only race it did under Smokey's ownership. Now Bud Moore received 4 cars in 1969, but one of these was immediately gifted to Alan Moffat to take to Australia, so that left 3. But for 1970, Shelby was dropped and Bud Moore went alone as the sole factory team and therefore received all the remaining Shelby cars. Now Bud Moore ran 3 cars in 1970 that I know of. 2 of these were newly built and the third one had run 2 races in 1969, late 1969, and then updated as a 70 model. And pretty well everything else was sold off. And then Ford pulled the pin at the end of 1970, and so Bud Moore Engineering had to carry on as an independent team in 1971. Now they had 4 really special bodies that had been stamped from thin gauge metal in late 1970 when Ford was still in the game. But I think that Bud Moore only actually raced 2 of these in 71. So, would you be surprised to learn that none, not even one, of the factory Boss 302 Trans-Am cars were genuine Boss 302s? It's true, they didn't need to be. See, Carcraft and the factory teams only needed rolling shells, and then they just basically blew them apart and customized virtually everything. So what were they then? Well, the first one built was the Shelby prototype, which was constructed by Carcraft in late 1968. And it carried the VIN 9F02R112073. The Bud Moore prototype had a 4 as the last digit of the VIN, so it was basically the next car that rolled off the assembly line. Now the giveaway here is the R shown in the 5th position in the VIN. If this was a Boss 302, that'd be a G. So the 2 prototypes actually left the assembly plant as R model 428 big block cars. Now the remaining 3 Shelby cars, all the Bud Moore cars and the Smokey car, all had an M in their VINs. So these all left the factory as 351 small block cars. Again, it didn't matter what they were when they rolled down the assembly line, because Carcraft and the teams completely blew them apart and customized everything. Now the first Bud Moore M code car had the VIN 9F02M148623. And then the M code cars with the VIN ending 4 and 5 also went to Bud Moore. The car with the VIN ending in 4 was the one that was gifted to Alan Moffat. The M code car ending in 6, basically the next car, went to Smokey Yunick. And the cars with the VIN ending in 7, 8 and 9 all went to Shelby. The 3 Mustangs run by Bud Moore in 1970 were also M code cars. The first of these had the VIN 9F02M212775. The other 2 had the VIN ending in 6 and 7. So basically 5, 6 and 7. And these were also 1969 cars, and the giveaway is the 9 at the beginning of the VIN. And in fact, these were supplied to Carcraft in around June of 1969, so they were later cars than the initial batch. And chassis number 7, or the VIN ending in 7, was the one that had run 2 races in late 1969 before being updated as a 70 model to run alongside the 2 fresh shells. And then there were the 4 bodies that Bud Moore had in 1971 with the special thin gauge sheet metal. These were bodies in white and never actually carried a VIN. And they were the only actual 1970 Mustangs that either of the two factory teams raced, even though Bud Moore wasn't actually a factory team by 1971. Because remember, the cars that Bud Moore raced in 1970 were all updated 1969 cars. So there you have it. There were 2 R code cars, 10 M code cars, and 4 bodies in white that made up the factory Boss 302 Mustang fleet. And apart from the 4 bodies in white, all of them started life as 1969 bodies, and none were genuine Boss 302s. So, was this video a little too Anorak-y? Does anyone other than me actually find this stuff interesting? You can get a bunch more info about these cars from Wolfgang Korn's excellent website, which I'll link below. Plus, I also wrote about these cars in this book right here. Now, if you guys actually enjoyed this and you want me to do another video on what happened to all the factory Boss 302s, then let me know in the comments below and I'll make another vid. Anyway, that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and the subscribe button and hit that little bell thingy so you'll get a notification when I post up a new video. Anyway, we will catch you next time. Thanks again. See ya. Bye-bye.
Parnelli Jones stands on it right from the start, sprinting away from the field with Mark Donohue directly behind him. Parnelli usually turns his fastest laps during the early going, spurred on by an empty track in front of him and Mark Donohue in his mirror.